cell phones off. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the committee meetings of the Bellingham City Council for April 21st. We have 3 committees meeting, and the first committee is Public Works and Public Safety, and that committee is chaired by Councilmember Terry Borneman.
Thank you, Michael. Joining me on the committee is Roxanne Murphy and Jean Knutson. Today we have 5 items before us. And the first is the discussion of a regional fire authority planning process. Chief, take it away.
Okay, good afternoon, council members. Bill Newbold with the fire department. And what I'm going to do today is give a brief presentation on an RFA, or Regional Fire Authority planning process. This presentation is for information only and is going to give us an overview of the steps that we can utilize to further explore the formation of a regional fire authority. First off, we might ask the question, what is a regional fire authority? Per the RCW, it's a municipal corporation that's its own independent taxing authority. The boundaries of any RFA are coextensive between the 2 or more agencies that come together to form an RFA. And for our consideration, what we've been looking at is the City of Bellingham Fire Department and Whatcom County Fire Protection District 8. Otherwise commonly referred to as the Marietta area, and then out towards the Gooseberry Point and Lummi Nation. And the process for forming an RFA is ultimately it's created by a vote of the people that's within that coextensive area of the multiple agencies. One of the things to point out here is that it is between 2 or more agencies currently by RCW to be able to form an RFA. A single entity in and of itself is unable to do that. Before we launch into to some of the important aspects of forming an RFA, I think it's worthwhile just to take a look back at our brief history between the Bellingham Fire Department and Fire District 8. In 2011, we entered into one of our first agreements between the 2 agencies in what was defined as Joint Operations and Services Agreement. This identified some areas that were up in the Bakerview-Bennett area, Alderwood area, and the Airport Industrial Park, where we were able to share our resources through automatic aid agreements and assist each agency and mutual response to EMS and fire incidents. We took that one step further in 2013, I believe it was February of 2013, where we entered into an administrative services agreement between the city and Fire District 8, whereby the city provided all chief level administrative services to the district, to include budgeting, facilities maintenance, capital planning, and the overall day-to-day oversight of the operations. In that process in 2013, we brought over one of the assistant fire chiefs from Fire District 8, that's Bill Hewitt, who's with the City of Bellingham today, and at that time, the chief of Fire District 8 was retiring, so it was natural to bring all of those services in-house. And then we took one step further in 2016, as many of you recall, sitting on the current council, where we entered into a what we call a full contract for services with the district. That was in July of 2016, whereby the city provides all fire and EMS services to the district. In that process, we transferred all of the full-time employees of the district over into the City of Bellingham, who are now City of Bellingham firefighters. One of the things I want to point out in all 3 of these steps is it's been a capitalization on the good relationship that's existed between the 2 agencies over time, and on every step of this has been strengthened throughout each agreement. And if you recall, when we went into exploring the 2016 contract for services, we started that by first looking at different forms of governance, RFA being one of those. And it was determined at that time, well, let's get the most achievable efficient solution at that moment, which was the contract for service, kind of keep the RFA card in our pocket, if you will, and then once we accomplish that contract for service, see if that develops as we intended it to, then let's begin to look at the RFA. That's where we are today, and so you see that as the gray last item up there. So what's involved in the RFA planning process? Essentially 3 steps, and naturally there's going to be a lot more work into each of these steps, but the first of it is the formation of what's called a planning committee. And in that planning committee will be responsible for developing what's called the plan, or the RFA service plan. And in that plan, in turn, is submitted to the voters to adopt that plan in place for the coextensive area between the multiple agencies. We'll dive a little bit deeper into each of these 3. So the first, on the formation of a planning committee. How we do that is each of the governing bodies, in this case Fire District 8 and the City of Bellingham, appoints 3 elected officials from each of the agencies. So in our example of District 8 and City of Bellingham, we would be looking at 6 elected members on the RFA Planning Committee. The purpose of this is that they're going to use, one of their first steps is, at their discretion, electing officers, adopting rules on frequencies of meetings, duration of meetings, and various procedures. They will use steering committee and subcommittees. Steering committees are often consisted of the fire department staff, other city staff, subject matter experts that may be called in to assist us in developing the plan. And then the planning committee also sets the time frame for providing the final report, or i.e. the plan, out to the voters. One important thing to note is that the planning committee, by its own choice, may choose to dissolve itself if in that process they determine that the RFA is not the right thing for that jurisdiction being served. And that can be accomplished in 2 ways. One is by a majority vote of the membership of the planning committee, or any jurisdiction can submit in writing with 30 days notice to withdraw from that planning committee. So in our case, having only 2 agencies, if one agency provides a notice, then by definition there, that planning committee would dissolve. When we talk about the RFA service plan, this is the nuts and bolts, or the meat and potatoes, if you will, of what the fire department's going to look like. It's the total design of that fire department. And in a sense, if you want to think about it, think about an organizational chart. And in that organizational chart and the plan, we're also going to define what is the governance board. Will that be appointed or elected officials of the jurisdiction served, or will it be appointed members from the existing elected bodies of the 2 different agencies? That governance board is different than the planning board. The governance board will be defined in the plan. The plan also defines the financing and the revenue sources for the services that will be provided. And when we talk about the fire and protection emergency services that are provided, the plan will describe what EMS, what fire, what life safety services, fire prevention, emergency management, fire dispatch, etc. That plan defines all the services that will be provided. It can also lay out the various services that could be contracted from other entities, or that other entities may contract from the RFA. And all along in this process, as the plan is being developed, the planning committee needs to create opportunities naturally for public input in the development of the plan as we move forward. And then the third part is the submission of that plan to the voter. And that process is the planning committee, once it finalizes its plan, the planning committee itself has to adopt that plan by a majority vote from that committee. That plan is then sent back to each of the governing bodies of the agencies that are interested in forming the RFA. And by resolution, each of those bodies has to adopt that plan. And then one single ballot measure is placed forward to the voters by that planning committee. And then depending on how the plan is structured, will determine whether it's a simple majority or whether it's a supermajority vote that's needed from the voting public. And when we talk about this, it's one ballot measure that's sent to the entirety of the coextensive boundary. It's not a majority or supermajority in each different agency. It's the combined. So essentially, those are the 3 steps that are put forward in that. And so in summary, and forming a planning committee to explore an RFA. You first put together 3 appointed electeds from each of the governing bodies. That planning committee in turn develops the RFA service plan with the 3 elements that you see there, and then submits that plan to the voters. Providing this information hopefully will give you an overview of the next steps ahead of us. And what I would look to do is, as we are continuing to work with the Bellingham Council and then also the Fire District 8 Commissioners, is to be back in front of you at your next meeting and look for input for 2 of council members to join Mayor Kelly and the 3 elected officials from Fire District 8 to potentially form that planning committee. And so with that, I can answer any questions.
Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the department for working on this above and beyond all of the existing roles and responsibilities that you carry out. And also just to say that change is never easy, it never comes easy. And so I thank the department and the other jurisdictions for keeping an open mind about this.
Thank you, Roxanne.
If a plan's put together and it goes to a vote, is this a simple majority vote of 50% plus 1 for passage, or is it a 60%?
It's a good question. So technically, the plan itself requires only a 50% vote, 50% plus 1. There's a caveat to that. If your funding source in the plan identifies a fire service benefits charge, the nature of a fire service benefit charge requires a 60% majority vote. So it depends on how your plan is structured and what are the revenue sources that the RFA will be collecting from.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Michael, and then April.
Well, I guess I still have some kind of like basic fundamental questions, and you don't have to answer them now, but if you can, that'd be great. The fire services are fully integrated, the staffs are already combined, the service area is not going to increase. But what I want to know is, if we move ahead with a regional fire authority, will we be able to tell the public that service levels will improve? And will we be able to tell, will we be able to tell the public that costs for the delivery of services will be lower? Will either of those 2 benefits come with a regional fire authority?
Good question. So why we're looking at a regional fire authority is to be able to provide the appropriate services to the combined communities that we serve in the most efficient manner. And in doing that, we want to make the best matched revenue sources for the provision of fire and EMS services. So the level of service will remain, if not improve, and that's what we would be seeking, in the most efficient manner. And then again, with the properly matched revenue sources for delivering those fire and EMS services.
So that one benefit might be that the taxing authority or the revenues will be better, different, increased?
Yes, and that's something that will all be thoroughly explored and vetted in the development of the plan.
Okay, April?
This question's probably more for Brian or the mayor. Currently, I think when you have to renew, say we decided to do this, we needed the 60%, but then upon renewal, I think RFAs have to have 60% each time, but there seems to be some legislation possibly currently to change that, and I wondered if there is.
I can speak to that.
Oh, okay.
You are right. So right now, initial onset, if we do look for a fire service benefits charge, is a 60% vote. Every 6 years, you are required to go back to the voters for a renewal of the fire service benefit charge. House Bill 1467 in its current state right now will give parity with fire districts such that there is only a 50% vote that is needed every 6 years to renew the fire service benefits charge. That currently has passed the House and the Senate and is waiting for signature.
Okay. Oh, great. That's what I was going to ask, if we could add it to our lobby potentially, just because we may go through this.
It's on the desk waiting to be signed.
You're already on it. Of course. Thank you.
Pinky?
Chief, just out of curiosity, can you tell me what the temperature is like in regards to the firefighters to move towards an RFA, if that is how it feels in the department?
Excited apprehension.
Okay.
I think we're all excited about it. At the same time, there are some concerns, and when I say concerns, those come in the form of questions that need to be answered. And as we get together in this planning committee and we begin doing some work together, when I mention that steering committee, not only is it comprised of fire staff, it'll be comprised of labor, it'll be comprised of other city staff and members from the fire district. As we go along in that, we're going to be answering our own questions and then furthermore be able to provide answers to any questions that the public may have. So all of that will be fleshed out. But I think in summation, it's excited apprehension.
And Chief, when along the process will you need the members of council to move forward on the committee?
What I would look for is your next meeting, May 8th, I could be back in front of you and looking for a recommendation of 2 council members to sit on that committee.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from committee? Well, thank you. I look forward to this coming back.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess in relationship to that, at some point we're going to need recommendations, and I would like to throw my name out to be part of that, because I've been working on those kind of things for a while, but yeah, this is going to be a big step. Okay, the next item we have before us is a job order contracting process. Ted?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. This item is just being introduced to the council today. We're not asking for any action today. However, if the council does support what we're bringing forward, we will come back with a resolution. There's a draft resolution in your packet, but again, we're not asking for action at this time. There's also a detailed memo in the packet on this topic, and as council knows, most of the city's projects, public work projects, are done through the traditional model of design, bid, build, which works very well. However, for most of our projects, we do a large number of very small projects. A lot of those happen to be around our facilities where we need to go in and make minor repairs or replacements of components of a building or some part of our facilities. And in those smaller projects, it takes a disproportionate amount of time to go through that formal process where we need to prepare some type of design, go out to bid, and then award to the low bid. And what we'd like to do is pursue an alternative process that's available to cities our size through state law, something we've not done before, but we believe will add quite a bit of flexibility, and in particular will speed up the process because we will have a process in order or in place called job order contracting. As I said, the memo goes into some pretty good detail about what that is. I'm going to turn it over now to Clark Williams, who's our superintendent that's in charge of facilities, and he'll give some additional information, and then we can certainly answer some questions that you might have about this.
Okay, good afternoon, Council. Ted kind of stole most of my thunder, but in summary, yes, this is just a quick informational session. I've asked Mr. Paul Burns to come up from the Gordian Group. They're specialists in job order contracting. So what we'd like to do is introduce the council to the concept of what we call JOC, how it can help the city implement some of our smaller projects by bundling them together in one larger capital renewal project. And in resolution, or in summary, what we hope to do is come back to the council and ask for the adoption of a resolution that supports this type of procurement process. So today is pretty much just informational, and Mr. Burns, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, council members and committee members. My name is Paul Burns. I flew up today from Las Vegas. Actually, I live in California. Excuse the sunburn. So I played a lot of softball this weekend. But anyway, thanks for having me here. Job order contracting has been around for over 25 years. Public agencies all around the country utilize it for exactly the reasons the director and facility director have mentioned. It's to streamline the procurement of smaller construction projects. The state law here allows you to do projects in the dollar value range of $350,000 and less per project. So you advertise these master agreements, you enter into contracts with general contractors, utilizing a lot of local subcontractor participation. The law, it's written in your document here, it's 90% subcontracted work. So there's a lot of opportunity for local subs to pick up work, working with the city's awarded contracts through the bid process. It does streamline process. I've been a county employee for a few years in San Luis Obispo, California. We were able to execute dozens and dozens of projects with the general contractors, building a very good relationship, following the law, following your contract documents, and really producing high-level projects. Projects that could be done in this process, any funding, so state, local, federal funding projects, they're allowed to go through the process. It's a cost-effective way to expedite and shorten the lead time, minimize paperwork and staff reports coming to council. You could always, and the agency could report back the progress to you. And it is a procurement process, so job order contracting does not take away anything you currently do. It's another tool in your tool belt to help with the appropriate project that involves renovation, repair, remodel. In the state, we work with many, many agencies, but around the country we work with cities, municipalities, school districts. The post office is one of the clients that the Gordian Group supports. So it's really all I have is a brief, kind of a high-level introduction. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I've just seen how this works in other jurisdictions, and I'm just going to be very supportive of it, especially for the ease of use and the fastness of it.
Gene?
So the level of, it's up to 350, anything over that, you'd have to go through the normal, so that's pretty basic. Okay.
Michael?
I really do appreciate using this to streamline, with a master agreement, all these smaller projects. But you say we have a large number of very small projects. $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 to me doesn't sound like a small project. So I guess I'm interested, if we chose a different number rather than maximum, how many jobs would it affect? Are 90% of the jobs, say, under $200,000? If we set a different number, would it still allow streamlining of the vast majority of jobs? I guess the reason I'm saying this is those larger jobs, I mean, we have a public duty to have kind of transparency and oversight over big expenditures. 350, 250 sounds like a big expenditure to me. Do you know how many jobs are in that upper range?
Yeah, most of the jobs are much, much smaller than that, and Clark can speak to maybe some numbers that I don't have. But in facilities, for example, we do a tremendous number of jobs that are 50,000 or under,
Right.
something of that nature. And then you start spending, as I mentioned, a disproportionate amount of the total project budget on getting the project ready to go out to bid. So you have any estimation on the number that are lower than 50 or 100?
Yeah, well, we could easily do 15 to 20 projects a year that are all under $50,000, but they all eat up an inordinate amount of time trying to get 3 competitive quotes, writing contracts for each of the smaller subcontractors, which is kind of a burden on them because they're not working under the master umbrella of a general contractor, so it's kind of cumbersome for them to get their bonding in place for small works like this. The other thing, Paul, can I ask you to address this?
Yes.
Under JOC, the limit is $350,000, but that's per contract, correct? That's per job.
Great question. So
And what was the maximum amount per year?
Right, so the maximum amount per year is $4 million a year, and the city could have 2 contracts. So you could have 2 umbrella or master contracts at $4 million, and you could execute projects up to $350,000 per project. So it's like having a dozen donuts. You go out to bid for the whole dozen, and you can execute projects underneath that. Types of projects could be ADA, curb gutter sidewalk improvements, office renovations, roofing replacements, chiller and boiler replacements. Many of the agencies we work with, I live in California, so many of the folks that I work with do parks, restroom repairs, lighting improvements, bathroom, carpet. We're doing the city hall down in the city of Vallejo right now. They're doing a council chambers remodel. It's going to be a $700,000 project. Right, so there's a lot of flexibility. You're going to have local general contractors with a specification, a citywide contract that meets the city's insurance and bonding requirement, and then a master format CSI technical spec and a pricing system that allows you to expedite and execute work very quickly. So it's firm fixed price, indefinite quantity contract.
I'll let you do a follow-up, then I got
So I guess just the follow-up is, I'm wondering if we could look at setting a slightly lower threshold that would still let through like 90% of the jobs, get all the benefit, but still have some oversight for some of these larger jobs, because $280,000 to me sounds like a large single job. I'm not talking about the overall annual limit, but the job limit.
Yeah, I mean, council could do that. I don't know that would have very many opportunities or very many projects that would fall into that category. I guess staff likes the what's laid out in state law. There's other opportunities. There's restrictions as well. So in the memo, it highlights that there's limitations on, for instance, standalone buildings that could be built under this process, even more limitations than the total dollar amount. It is set up to still comply with that public bidding, competitive bidding and procurement process. I mean, it's identified to still have all of the competition and oversight that we typically do. All of the prices are agreed upon and negotiated beforehand, so you do have that fixed price benefit. So, I mean, council could certainly take that action. Our recommendation would be to do what the state law says.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Matt Stamps, Legal Department. Just one other point to note on that. The city already has the small works roster process as another alternative mechanism, and that's up to $300,000, and those don't come to council. So that might be something as a comparison to this.
So just want to check on something you were saying. With putting contracts right now, you got to put out bids for all these subs. Under this one, is my understanding then the bid goes out to just the general, and then they don't have to do bids to the subs on the other parts of the jobs? Is that?
So through a competitive RFP process, the city would select 2 general contractors that would fall under the job order contracting process. And they're limited to doing 20% of the work in any particular project. So the general contractor would be responsible for hiring their subs to complete the other 80% of the work. Does that answer your question?
Well, that doesn't, so they don't have to, right now it goes out to bids for 3 bids, but under this process it wouldn't have to go, for the generals, they don't have to put it out for bids for the rest of the 80% of the contract. Is that correct?
90, I think. Isn't it 90?
What's that?
I know they're going to go for the best deal anyway,
That's correct.
But I'm just curious about that, is that they can just do their buddies and they don't have to do that part.
Yeah, so can you handle that, Paul? How does the general typically obtain their subs?
The general is going to, I mean, they have there's many ways to identify subcontractors, many different factors, right? But not historically, they're going to identify the best contractors, subcontractors for the type of work. Every project is different. They're going to try to use as many local contractors as they can, typically because there are many projects in construction or in proposal phase at the same time. So they need to have a wide variety of options available to them. The city has the ability to, when the proposal is submitted and a subcontractor list is submitted to you for approval, you have the ability to look at that list and approve the project. If there are, in some agencies in California, I don't know here, some agencies in California, if there are subcontractors proposed on a particular project that have had problems or maybe litigation or something going on where the agency doesn't want to hire them, you can reject the subcontractor. I don't know if that's here,
Okay,
but
well,
it's totally
I'm just kind
transparent.
of
It's
curious
transparent.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally
Yes, ma'am.
transparent.
Yeah, Terry, in the law, the RCW on that does specify that the general's use of subs must be equitably distributed, or the work must be equitably distributed among subs.
Okay.
So the city would have a chance to look at that and see how that's going.
Yeah, okay, just curious on how that worked. This is new to us.
Absolutely.
Any other, April, sorry.
So the group is going to get 5% of the work order, right? And I'm assuming that in looking at, especially staff's request, that that cost is going to be less than what we currently are trying to do with our staff and staff costs. So I just wondered, I know that you're probably already overworked and this will free up, but that's kind of hopefully going to be helping budget. What are you looking at now utilizing your staff for? What is this freeing you up to do?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We believe even with any markup to the JOC, to the general contractor, it's still a less expensive way than when we add up all the other costs associated with getting a project out to bid. And those are both staff costs, maybe hiring an engineering firm or an architecture firm to help with the bid spec. So we looked at the total project cost and believe that this is not necessarily a way to save a lot of money, although we think it will be less expensive depending on each individual project, but it is more getting projects out quicker. That's the driving factor. So for instance, now we just simply don't always have the ability to get all the projects out on the street and get them done. So we're going to be making more efficient use of our existing resources and delivering projects that we think at a competitive price.
Okay. Yes, April.
Just more projects
Is what we would do.
Yeah. Okay, and then my last question is, and I probably need your help, Matt. When it's easy to say equitably distributed, but like what specifically, and you've mentioned several times this will encourage local contractors, but is there specific language that we either need to add or that's already there that really ensures that we're getting that local, at least city, Wacom, maybe even regional contractors?
The statute does not go beyond saying equitably distributed. And if the program's adopted, the only thing that's required right now is a resolution finding that it's in the city's interest. It wouldn't be an ordinance spelling out the particulars of the program. You'd fall back on state law for that. Generally speaking, we wouldn't be able to do a local kind of a preference. So equitable just means what it means. I think you'd look at it, and if you see a contractor using the same people over and over again, that might be something you want to take a second look at.
Ted?
Yeah, I think it is important to restate that right now when we put projects out, sometimes we don't get a tremendous amount of companies bidding on our projects because the requirements are beyond their capabilities just in terms of the insurance and the bonding or the paperwork itself. In this process, the JOC covers all of that, so it will likely open up the number of folks that have an opportunity to work for the city.
Okay, yes.
I would just say for your comment that understanding how expensive just 1 foot of sidewalk is, that I think $350 is reasonable. There's projects where I'm just shocked at how much it would cost, and it's just this little frontage of sidewalk that we've been missing for a long time. So I can see where that $350 marker is reasonable.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? So what's the next step with this? You will be bringing something back at the next meeting, or?
Yeah, I think we would we'll look at your schedule for the next meeting, but if the calendar can withstand it, we'll bring something back at your next meeting.
Okay. And then what I would ask, if anyone has questions about this beforehand, if you could get them to Ted so we can deal with them when it comes up next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that was information only? Thank you. The next item is Transportation Commission update and work plan review.
Good afternoon, Chad Schulhauser, Public Works. I'm joined today by Brett Bopane, who's the current chair of the Transportation Commission, here to give you a brief update on our annual report. I'm going to hand it over to Brett.
Yeah, so I am Brett Bopane, current chair for the Transportation Commission. Just reporting on 2016 activities and then a little bit about the Transportation Commission. It's formed in 2009. There's 9 members that serve.
Sorry, I don't talk about enough.
I'll step back there for a second. Transportation Commission, we were formed in 2009. There's 9 members with 3-year terms. We do meet monthly, and we're supported by Public Works. Currently, we are full. We have 9 full members. We're losing 1 person here in May, but we've already got another candidate who'll be coming in, and then we've got another one that's leaving in October. So the current makeup of the TC, I like this because we have a nice range of expertise here. We've got 3 engineers with civil transportation backgrounds, 1 real estate person who's also a property manager, and he owns property in the downtown Bellingham area. We have an attorney, professor in environmental justice, which it's a nice niche to have there, a bike store manager, and 1 chemical engineer who's currently retired, and then a software electronics R&D retiree as well. So quickly, the duties that we have as the TC is just to advise the council on transportation policy. We'll look at comprehensive plan amendments. We love all our acronyms, so we've got the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TBD, the Transportation Benefit District. We're looking at some of the projects that get funded there. Overall transportation strategic priorities, supporting the bike and PED master plans, and then also we're just a voice for citizens out there. So things that we did in 2016. So you probably recognize some of these. We looked at the 6-year TIP. We also supported the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, the TRAM, the Transportation Report on Annual Mobility that Chris puts together every year. We also reviewed some things with the downtown parking. Also worked a little bit with WTA on their 6-year strategic plan. This next one's kind of cool, the Complete Networks Ordinance, which we got through there at the end of the year. And with that, the city got a $500,000 grant from TIB because of the Complete Networks Ordinance, so that was great. We also reviewed some of the bicycle wayfinding signage, the Transportation Benefit District projects. We also looked at the Bakerview intersection justification report, so up there by Costco. Lakeway bike study is something else that they got some cool options coming forward in that. And then right there at the end of the year, we talked about the parking removal on Holly Street for the overlay project, which is currently underway. This next slide, I just want to show you quickly funding. So looking back to 2008, on that upper left pie chart, before kind of the market downturn, a lot of the funding you'll see was coming from the gray slice of the pie there, the Bellingham Street Fund. But then you fast forward to today and you know 2016, 2017 funding for the TIP, and you'll see that that has transitioned a lot to be the TBD. So all I'm trying to show there is just the importance of the TBD to the TIP funding. So what we're doing in 2017, again, we'll be looking at the TIP here in May. We recently just actually looked at the TRAM and then continuing to support the Transportation Benefit District projects, and we'll also be talking more about parking as well. Some of the other things as needed, waterfront plan, the bike and PED master plan, and anything else that Public Works can come up with for us to look at. So with that, I'm just going to conclude. Hey, come out, join us for a meeting. It's fun. All the cool kids are doing it. Second Tuesday of every month at 6 o'clock, right over there in the mayor's boardroom. The meetings are open to the public, so anybody can come. And I just want to conclude, I work a lot with different municipalities, and I feel like we're really lucky here in Bellingham because we have great staff. Public Works staff, they're great to work with, and they do good things for the city.
Great. So, thank you, Brett. Committee, any questions? Yes, Roxanne.
I just want to express appreciation for the commissioners. You guys are all volunteers, and we love your expertise. That really helps in the work we do, so thank you.
Good. Thanks. Anything else? Michael.
Yeah, so when this was, when the council came up with this idea a while ago, we had a couple of, like a parking commission and a pedestrian commission. They were kind of spread out, and one of the purposes or the hope for benefits of a transportation commission is a more integrated picture. Is that how it's feeling to you, that you've got, you know, a broad look? You said you'd look at parking, roads, the whole thing. Do you feel like you're being able to kind of provide that integration element?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're getting kind of a broad look at all the different aspects of what goes on in the city. You know, you mentioned the parking, the transportation projects, the TBD. You know, we're looking at the tram. So, yeah, I do feel like it is a pretty broad look at it. And you know, that's why I'm really appreciative that we have such a breadth of expertise there of different people representing. And you know, the next guy that might be coming on here, we don't know if he's been appointed yet, but he's got another different area of expertise, so that'll be great too.
Anything else? Okay.
Oh, the doctor.
Yeah.
He's an anesthesiologist. I didn't know if we could release that yet.
Okay, Brett, I want to thank you for coming forward today and for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And that was for information only. Okay. The next item coming up is the bid award for the Woodstock intersection improvements.
Thank you, Chad Schwalzer, Public Works again. On April 12th, we opened our bids for the Woodstock-James intersection improvement project. Project engineer Craig Mueller is here to discuss that with you. We'd like to award that to our low bidder, who is Ram Construction. They came in at about $1.25 million. Our engineer's estimate was just under $1.7 million. They were the low responsive bidder, and this is the project that will make Woodstock Way the through movement at that intersection. I'm sure you're all aware of that. I'm going to hand it over to Craig to talk about the project specifics and ask for award.
Unfortunately, my projects in the last 2 years don't seem to fit well on one normal piece of paper. Good afternoon. Craig Mueller, project engineer with Public Works, and this is for the Woodstock Intersection Improvements Project. This is the intersection of Woodstock Way and James Street, right next to Sunset Pond Park, which is right here. Kmart and the shopping area is down here, that way's north. And what this project will do is it will move the through movement. You can see, you can kind of see on this. The existing travel goes through James Street here, Woodstock comes in through here, and you can see in the half-tone streets, you come to a stop sign. You have to look both ways, and you're really restricted looking to your left. There's a big hill there. There's incredibly limited sight distance. So what this project will do is it will turn James Street onto Woodstock as the through movement. This section of James Street will come to a stop sign, be able to see both ways, and make it a lot safer of an intersection. So it will be brought to full arterial standards, sidewalks and bike lanes. One thing to that we need to advise the council on is James Street will not be closed for this. For the first half or first 3/4 of this, Woodstock Way will have to be closed from this intersection down to where the apartments are. There's no other driveways, and it gets a fraction of the traffic that James Street does. James Street movement will continue to move through here while we build this. Once this is in place, traffic can be moved over, and we would then close this section off to complete it. So really the only really irritating parts is going to be when we connect everything together at the very end. And we have 90 working days in this project, so it's approximately a 4.5 to 5 month duration. So we had three bids. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder was Ram Construction, $1,254,629.90, and the engineer's estimate was $1,692,802.
Yes, Roxanne.
When I first moved to Bellingham, I was looking at a map and trying to figure out a bike ride, and I wound up on this section of James Street and quickly learned that was the stupidest thing I could have ever done. So I support this so much for creating this safety for that area especially. So I'll be very happy to award the bid to Ram Construction for the Woodstock intersection improvements.
Dean.
I agree. This is my wife's back way to the mall. I'll tell her it's down for 6 months. So thanks.
Yes. And I always love seeing a bid come 400,000 under estimate. So, yeah, I will support that. Yep.
So
April.
because it's so close to all the wonderful trail connections that we've made, there's a lot of apartments up along Sunset that can look out and see some of that trail, but they don't really have great access. So I'm assuming every time we do a road, this will improve that pedestrian access as people are coming down using Woodstock?
Yes, this will.
Can you, just because I know a lot of people that live along James Street and Sunset, could you just give a little bit more about what that's going to do so they'll understand the improvements that are coming forward?
Absolutely. Let's start with the more boring part of, there's going to be sidewalks through here. Right now, the sidewalk ends right at the park, and we have a very narrow section over where Squalicum Creek used to flow through, right through here. That culvert is very short. So what we're doing with that, we improved it the best that we could in the interim while waiting for this project, but it's still only a couple of feet wide. It's between the fence here and the railing here. So we are putting sidewalk through here. Currently, there's a little bit of gap in sidewalk here on James Street. Those will be connected as well. Plus, right now, there is a trail that goes from the apartments on Woodstock, trail that ends up here at the intersection. Then you have to walk along that very narrow section. We came to council probably about 5 or 6 months ago with the 4F Transportation Act, Section 4F presentation on this. And because we are impacting a property that is currently managed for recreational use, we have to mitigate for any impacts to it. So we're picking up that trail right here. You can see it there. And instead of bringing it up here, this is all going to be a retaining wall. It is going to go over the filled-in Squalicum Creek channel and brought directly into the park.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll recommend approval to the full council tonight. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're down to the last and easiest item. Discussion on the proposal to remove on-street parking from Orleans Street.
Good afternoon, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department, along with Chris Como. This is the item that came to council a few meetings ago where we were looking for direction on removal of no parking along, at the time, both Orleans and Woburn sections of those streets. Council gave direction on Woburn, but asked for us to go out and do a little bit more outreach to the neighborhood about the potential of, rather than limiting parking on the west side of Orleans, asking the residents about the potential of restricting parking on the east side of Orleans. So we did that. We sent out information to the area, to the residents and property owners in the area. Did get some feedback. That feedback's contained in the packet. Essentially, we got a couple more requests to not remove parking on the west side of the street. As we presented at the last meeting, the parking utilization is very low on both sides of Orleans throughout this section. And this section of Orleans was, again, identified in the bicycle master plan as a section of arterial to implement bike lanes. So to put the bike lanes in, we do need to remove parking from one side. The parking rates were a little bit lower on the west side. That's why that was brought forward. But we went back out, got that information. Happy to answer any more questions that council might have about it. Either side does work for implementing a bike lane, and it's really just a matter of trying to limit the impact on the adjacent neighborhood. So,
Gene.
You kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. It doesn't matter which side of the street you're going to go on, somebody's going to be happy. So is there a way, because I lean more to let the lady who's had that hairdresser business for 42 years keep her parking on that side of the street. Is there a way to condition it that after that business is gone, that that could change? That there would be parking there?
You know, once the no parking's put in, we do have to, it kind of changes the channelization of the street to make sure that everything lines up, and it would be challenging, I think, to switch it back. The other thing we found, and I think some of this information's in the packet, we've done this on other arterials. Northwest is probably the prime example, and our experience has been once the change is made, you know, people become accustomed to the parking that's available and the traffic patterns, and the people that live there, they really do, you know, learn to adjust to the way that the parking restrictions have been implemented, and generally seems to work pretty well. So I think it would be challenging to go back and forth.
I have a bit of a more concrete answer, and that is that the main reason we're doing this is we're trying to put curb extensions at the intersection of Illinois and Orleans Street. And we can't design the intersection until we know which side of the street the parking comes off of. And once we do that, it's permanent. And we'll make the crossing shorter at the intersection. And that's part of the Illinois Bike Boulevard that we put in 2015. When you get to an arterial street, you want to make sure there's a safe crossing there for both pedestrians and bicyclists. So really the direction we need is one side or the other.
Well, I'm inclined to go ahead and make a motion that we keep the parking on that side of the street where the...
What side? Okay.
That's the west side, isn't it, or the east side?
Yeah, I think what Gene is making a motion to remove parking on the east side. So you would like the salon to retain their parking?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would be no parking on the east side is what Gene is suggesting.
Okay, committee, comments? Okay, anybody else have comments? April?
So I lived on Northwest Avenue when we removed the parking. And I remember this because neighbors were knocking on my door and like, they're going to do parking counts, get your cars out on the street. And I remember thinking like, I don't park on the street. Like, okay, I'll park my car on the street for the day. And it was really upsetting. And people were sure that people were going to die trying to cross the street with their parking. And I would assume Northwest is just as busy, if not more busy. And it happened, and it was a change, and now nobody would know the difference. And I actually feel a lot safer cycling. So I wish I could have been at the last committee meeting, but a first grade class needed me, so I was gone. But we're going to keep running into this, and I just caution council that there's a process, and thankful to the Transportation Commission and staff. They've been through a lot of that, and they've set the criteria. And if each time one comes forward, one person's upset, and I understand Miss Ira has had this business for a long time, Gene, I get it, but now we open it up to the other side, it caused staff time, staff pain. Now another person feels like maybe we're, you know, more preferential to her than them. It's just it's going to get a big mess, and then we're going to set a precedent. So, I mean, I appreciate your motion, but this evening I'll be asking that we just retain what originally was there. Nothing that unusual came forward. I mean, if it was, I would certainly entertain it, but we got a lot more bike and ped improvements to do, and I just don't want to set a precedent that each time we're going to go back and then redo the other side, and then that's going to happen. So I just caution.
Yeah, and I can go along with it, Gene. I understand what you're saying, April, but that's why we have a public hearing. And then we have to make the decision from what we hear from a public hearing on which way to go. And since you're right, we're going to not make everybody happy, so I can go along with it this way as well as the other one. So, Michael?
If indeed the council decides to switch and go forward with removing parking at the east as opposed to the west, in terms of the crossing improvements you were talking about, Chris, and in terms of how it hooks up with the rest of the system further south, is that workable?
To be quite frank, it doesn't matter to us which side of the street the parking is retained on. It's really, we just don't have the physical space. It will work on either side of the street. Just to be really clear, the feedback that we got with the second round of notification that you asked us to do, there were no comments wanting us to retain the parking on the east side. It was really more people living on the west side saying, please don't take mine away. Just to be clear.
Any other comments? Okay.
And to be clear, too, in the original counts, if you look back, the reason why staff chose the original, because counts were quite a bit more on that one side. So when we just look at parking, I know most people, they get a notice and they probably, you know, like I didn't respond to when it was on Northwest. But it's, again, if you just look at the data, and I appreciate that it's going to impact a business that's been around for a long time, but there's safe parking other places, and I appreciate that one person's vocal, and it is a process, but we got to think about all the people that are parking, and now you're going to be asking the most amount of people that park on the one side to be crossing. So.
Okay. Yes, Gene.
Just to be clear, that happened to when we did Cornwall.
Right.
All the parishioners that go to the Assumption Church all park on one side of the street. They can't park on that side of the street anymore. So, you know, it works for everybody. Everybody gets mad.
Yep. Yes, Roxanne.
Just really quickly, I just want to thank you guys for doing additional community outreach, because this is really going to help us make a more informed decision, and the more community outreach we can do, the better. I'm going to be supporting this.
Okay, so we have a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we will recommend that we're going to remove the parking on the east side tonight. Yeah, I just got east side. Okay, I'm going to write it down here. I thought that's what I was saying. Yes. Okay, we'll recommend to the full council tonight.
Thank you.
Yep.